Tony Stark, the genius billionaire, playboy, philanthropist. The heart and soul of the Avengers wasn't the full story. What if beneath the charm, beneath the flashy suits, beneath the heroic sacrifice, there was a hidden identity, a second life, one that Marvel never wanted us to piece together, because it would change everything we think we know about the MCU. Ask yourself this. Was Tony Stark ever truly Iron Man? Or has he secretly always been Dr. Doom? It sounds crazy, right? How could Tony Stark, the man who snapped his fingers to save the universe, be connected to Victor Von Doom, one of the most infamous villains in Marvel history? But stay with me, because the deeper we dive into this theory, the more you'll see the connections lining up like puzzle pieces. This isn't just about one man's duality, it's about fate, legacy, science, and power. It's about the thin line between hero and villain, and how sometimes the only difference is perception. Tony Stark's story, as we know it, is the story of redemption. A man once consumed by arrogance and weapons dealing, who transformed into a protector of Earth. But let's rewind. Let's peel back the surface. What if the arrogance never truly went away? What if the obsession with control, with technology, with bending the universe to his will, was never really about protecting anyone but himself? That's where the seeds of doom begin. Think about it. Tony Stark and Victor Von Doom are more alike than they are different. Both are child prodigies. Both are inventors who outsmart even the most brilliant minds around them. Both are egotistical, sometimes dangerously so. And both, at their core, are men obsessed with reshaping the world in their image. The MCU paints Stark as the hero because he's on the side we root for. But what if, just like Doom, his every action was rooted in control and dominance, in the belief that only he could fix the world? The story starts much earlier than Iron Man's cave in Afghanistan. It begins with the philosophy behind the man. Tony's inventions weren't just about saving people. They were about proving himself, proving that he was the smartest man in the room, the one who could solve problems no one else could. Doesn't that sound like Doom? A man so convinced of his superiority that the world must bend to his vision, whether it wants to or not. Now here's where things get fascinating. In the comics, Victor Von Doom was always obsessed with science, but also with mysticism. He blends technology with sorcery, creating a unique kind of power that no one else can rival. And when you look at Tony's arc in the MCU, doesn't it feel like he was inching toward that exact path? From building an AI that nearly destroyed the planet, to creating nanotech that could manipulate matter itself. Tony wasn't just playing with gadgets. He was becoming something bigger, something godlike. He was building the kind of empire Doom would be proud of. But why would Marvel plant the seeds of Tony Stark as Doom? Why would they blur the lines between their most beloved hero and one of their greatest villains? Maybe because the truth of the multiverse demands it? The MCU has already shown us that different universes have different versions of the same people, variants. In one world, Tony Stark is the selfless hero who dies saving billions. But in another, Tony Stark never learns humility. In another, his obsession with power consumes him. In another, Tony Stark doesn't become Iron Man. He becomes Dr. Doom. And here's the kicker. What if those universes aren't as separate as we think? What if the Tony Stark we know and the Doom that's about to enter the MCU are reflections of the same man, fractured across realities? That would mean the hero we loved and the villain we'll soon fear are not just opposites, but counterparts destined to clash because they are, in essence, the same person. But let's not jump too far ahead yet. The real key lies in Tony's psychology. Strip away the armor, the money, the witty one-liners, and what's left? A man terrified of losing control. That fear defined him. From his panic attacks in Iron Man 3, to his obsession with creating Ultron, to his drive to build the time-space GPS in Endgame. Everything about Tony screamed one thing: I can't let the world spin without me at the center. And that's the exact same mantra that drives Doom. Now imagine this. What if Tony's journey wasn't just about saving the world, but about preparing for something bigger? What if all his tech, all his plans, all his desperate grabs at control were laying the foundation for the rise of Doom? And here's the shocking twist. The clues have been in front of us the whole time. For instance, Tony's armor evolution mirrors Doom's own iconic look. From clunky beginnings in a cave to sleek nanotech perfection, Tony was perfecting the very idea of armored supremacy. Doom's armor isn't just metal, it's a symbol of invulnerability, a second skin that makes him untouchable. Sound familiar? Tony spent his entire life chasing the same dream, to make himself untouchable, to conquer fear, death, and even time itself. But let's dig deeper. Doom, at his core, is a tragic character. His arrogance cost him everything: his family, his face, his chance at normal life. He wears his mask not just as armor, but it's a prison. Now look at Tony. He too was a prisoner of his own hubris. His genius brought him fame, but also enemies, destruction, guilt. In the cave, when he first built the Iron Man suit, he wasn't just escaping terrorists. He was forging his destiny, a destiny that could lead down one of two paths: redemption or doom. And here's where the theory gets even more chilling. The MCU has already hinted at the possibility of a darker Stark in What If. We saw versions of Tony that were manipulative, power-hungry, reckless. In one timeline, he sides with Killmonger. In another, he never stops creating weapons. These aren't accidents. These are Marvel planting seeds. Seeds that tell us Tony Stark was always just one choice away from becoming Victor Von Doom. Now, you might be asking, if Tony Stark is Doom, then why haven't we seen it yet? Why didn't the MCU reveal it before his sacrifice in Endgame? The answer is simple: timing. Marvel's storytelling is long form, like a chess game. They let us fall in love with Tony, let us mourn him, let us believe his story was over. And then, when Doom arrives, the shock will hit harder than anything else they've ever done. Imagine the emotional gut punch of realizing the hero we adored is also the villain we now must fear. But before we get there, let's walk slowly through the path that connects Stark to Doom. It's not just about armor or arrogance. It's about legacy. Both Tony and Victor are haunted by their fathers. Both carry the weight of trying to surpass the men who came before them. Both build empires not just out of ambition, but out of a desperate need to prove themselves. That father-shaped wound is what makes them who they are. And in the end, it's what drives them to extremes. Think back to Iron Man 2, when Tony uncovers his father's hidden message, the secret blueprint for a new element. That was Howard Stark, whispering from beyond the grave, shaping Tony's future. Now think of Victor Von Doom, whose obsession with surpassing his father's failures led him to pursue Forbidden's knowledge. These are mirrored journeys, parallel lines converging toward the same destination. And yet the genius of Marvel's storytelling is that they never show us the whole picture at once. They let us see Tony as the shining star, the beating heart of the Avengers. But if you tilt the camera just slightly, if you look from another angle, you see something darker. You see the arrogance, the obsession, the hunger for control. You see Doom staring back at you through Stark's eyes. So the real question isn't, was Tony Stark always Dr. Doom? The real question is, was Tony Stark ever anything but Dr. Doom? Because when you strip away the labels of hero and villain, when you look at the choices, the obsessions, the need to dominate fate itself, maybe Doom was always there, waiting just beneath the surface. And that's where our journey truly begins. Because in Act 1, we've only scratched the surface of the theory. We've seen the parallels, the psychological clues, the seeds Marvel planted. But in Act 2, we're going to dig into the multiverse, the timelines, the cosmic chess game that makes this theory not just possible, but inevitable. We'll explore how Tony's death might not have been the end, but the transformation, the moment when Iron Man died and Doom was born. When we left off, Tony Stark's life looked complete. He had given everything, snapped his fingers, and saved the universe. His funeral was framed like the final chapter of a hero's tale. But the more you look at that ending, the more it feels less like a conclusion and more like a doorway. Because when you hold the infinity stones in your hands, even for a second, you don't just die. You leave a ripple, an echo, a possibility. Tony's death is the most suspicious in all of Marvel's storytelling. Think about it. Hulk survived his snap. Thanos survived his. Yes, they were scarred. Yes, they were weakened, but they lived. Why? Because the Infinity Gauntlet doesn't simply kill, it transforms. It twists, reshapes, burns through you. But it doesn't erase your existence entirely. And Tony wasn't just anyone. He was the man who built his own gauntlet. He wasn't wielding alien tech. He was wielding his own creation. That means what happened to him might not have been death in the way we think of it. It could have been something else. In the comics, Doom's story often begins with tragedy and transformation. An experiment gone wrong. A scar that never heals. A man who steps away from mortality and into something larger, darker. Now compare that to Tony's final act. What if the stones didn't end him? What if in some branching universe, Tony Stark survives, but survives changed, scarred not on his body but on his mind? Imagine a Tony who's tasted the power of 6 stones at once, who's looked reality in the eye and bent it to his will, only to be dragged back into mortality. That man wouldn't just rest. That man wouldn't let go. That man would become Doom. And here's where the multiverse comes in. The Loki series, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, Spider-Man, No Way Home, all of them hammered home. One truth: every choice creates another universe. Every outcome exists somewhere. That means there isn't just one Tony Stark, there are millions. In one world, he snaps and dies a hero. In another, he snaps and live, but loses himself in the process. In another, he never builds Ultron. Or worse, he perfects Ultron and unleashes him on the galaxy. Each branch creates a different Tony, and among them, one line is inevitable: a Tony who becomes Victor Von Doom. Marvel has been hinting at this for years, quietly, almost invisibly. In What If, we saw multiple Stark variants who were reckless, manipulative, and dangerous. One trusted Killmonger, another never stopped making weapons, another couldn't stop himself from pushing too far. None of those Starks wore a green cloak or metal mask, but the personality, the arrogance, the obsession, it was all there. Each of those glimpses was a warning. Tony Stark is only one step away from doom. And if we think about it carefully, his obsession was never really about saving people. It was about control. Ultron wasn't meant to be peace. Ultron was meant to be Tony's control over peace. The Iron Legion wasn't about protection. It was about Tony making sure the world bent to his vision of order. Even the time-space GPS in Endgame wasn't just a tool, it was Tony proving he could crack time travel where no one else could. Doom works the same way. Every invention, every spell, every mask is built on one principle: only I can fix the world. Now picture this: a branch where Tony doesn't stop after the snap. A branch where he refuses to let go of the stone's power. Maybe he survives, burned and scarred, but alive. And maybe in that survival he realizes something terrifying: he could be more than a man. He could be a god. That's the Doom moment. That's the fracture where Iron Man ends and Dr. Doom begins. And Doom is never born in a vacuum. Doom always rises in times of chaos. In the comics, Doom thrives when the world is breaking apart, when universes are colliding. And what is the MCU building toward now? Multiversal collapse, incursions, wars between worlds. Who do you think would emerge from that chaos? Not just Kang. Kang is a conqueror. But Doom. Doom is a ruler. Kang burns the board. Doom takes the throne. And who better to step into that throne than Tony Stark himself? Not as the man who died saving the world, but as the man who couldn't stop trying to control it. This is where the heartbreak comes in. Imagine the Avengers, or what remains of them, facing Doom. They peel back the mask, expecting to see a stranger, a tyrant from Latveria. But instead, they see Tony Stark. Not their Tony, a variant. Twisted, scarred, unrecognizable in his will to dominate. But still Tony, the mentor, the friend, the man they buried. How do you fight that? How do you destroy the monster when the monster wears the face of the man who once saved you? That's not just conflict. That's tragedy. And Marvel knows tragedy. They've built their entire emotional engine on it. They gave us the death of Natasha, the sacrifice of Vision, of the fall of Loki. But none of those hits would compare to seeing Tony Stark again. Alive but corrupted. Revealed not as the savior but as the villain. That's the gut punch. That's the twist that leaves theaters in silence. But let's look deeper at the psychology that makes this believable. Doom is defined by loss. He loses his mother, his pride, his face. Tony is also defined by loss. His parents, Yinsen, Coulson, Peter, Parker slipping away on Titan. These losses broke him, shaped him. In one universe, they made him better. They gave him humility. They led him to sacrifice. But in another, those same losses could curdle. They could make him bitter, controlling, furious at a universe that kept taking. In that universe, Tony wouldn't stop building. He wouldn't stop fighting. He wouldn't accept loss. And when a man refuses to accept loss, he becomes a tyrant. Now connect this with Marvel's grand plan. Chang is the storm, the chaos, the tearing down of universes. But Doom is the order that follows. He steps into the void and crowns himself ruler of what's left. This isn't speculation. It's what Doom does in the comics. During Secret Wars, he takes the fragments of reality, and rebuilds them into his own dominion. And who better to do that in the MCU than a man who has already rebuilt the world with his machines, his suits, his tech? Who better than Tony Stark, the man who once declared, "I am Iron Man," now declaring, "I am Doom." And here's the genius. Marvel doesn't need to undo Endgame. They don't need to tarnish Tony's sacrifice. They only need to show us that in another universe, another branch, another echo. The story didn't end the same way. That Tony Stark didn't stop. That Tony Stark became Victor Von Doom. And that revelation makes every moment we spent with him richer, more complicated, more devastating. Because in the end, Doom isn't just a villain. He's the shadow of Tony Stark, the inevitable conclusion of his flaws, his arrogance, his obsession, the Tony who couldn't stop, the Tony who wouldn't die, the Tony who became something far worse. And that brings us to the edge of the storm, because Act 3 isn't just about the theory anymore. It's about the climax. It's about secret wars. It's about a multiverse tearing itself apart, heroes scrambling to survive, and Doom Tony Stark's Doom rising from the ashes to seize everything. That's where the story ends. That's where the twist becomes the climax. That's where Iron Man and Doom finally become one.